E360 TV proudly presents messages of inspirational stories. Live streaming now to millions of devices, including Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, with your host, Donna Guimwa, producer and host, Jim Grant, producer and host, along with Michaela Vidal, administrator and host, and Gaia Guimwa Balconi Wada, editor-in-chief. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Today we got a wonderful show for you today. We're very excited about it. We're going to be talking more about how to reduce, stress and worry in your life. And right before we went live, I was talking to Emerson Brantley. Emerson is our director of marketing here. He's a great friend of ours, a huge, fan of what we do, and we're just so proud to be associated with him. He's family. And I was talking to Emerson about next week, we're going to do a series on the lost art of storytelling. And on Monday, we're going to kick it off because Emerson made a great idea. Let me invite Emerson to the show there. He's looking down, I think. There he is. How you doing, Emerson?
Hello.
Welcome to the show, my man.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's an honor for us to have you here. But right before we went live, and I was sharing with you what we're going to be doing next week with the lost art of storytelling, and you shared the very first show Monday next week. Emerson and I are going to do the show, and you were going to share something with us. So give them a little snapshot of what it was, an example of what you were sharing with me.
Well, it has to do with as everyone knows, I do marketing and have worked with companies all over the world of all sizes. But this one I didn't work with, but it's a very famous marketing example where a single story did all the legwork. And it was for the Wall Street Journal. And it literally generated over half of all of the Wall Street Journal sales for years. And Wow. It was a story. And by the way, it was a story that never mentioned how you needed to buy the Wall Street Journal. Not once. So we'll share that. We'll walk through it. It's a very famous example, but it's an example of how when you have a compelling telling story that engages people, that you can do amazing things for your cause, for your business, or for whatever. And one other thing, Jim, that we'll touch on next week. I don't want to spill all the beans now, but it's learning to edit. Editing your story is one of the most important things you can learn to do.
Wow.
Separate the wheat from the chaff, get it down to what matters, and have a purpose in it, and you're home free.
Oh, yeah. Give them an example of how some people will get involved in some ridiculous story and just get people totally lost.
Oh, dear Lord. I get lost, if there are too many rabbit trails in a story. Like somebody's telling me a story about how they had a sister-in-law, and that sister-in-law had been married once before, but it was annulled, and it was from Nevada, but they actually had grown up in Georgia, Chatham County, Georgia, but there was this thing in Georgia that got passed. And what that meant for them was the land that they had. Now, their original land was in Nebraska. The land that they had there now, and it's like, I'm totally lost by this point.
Yeah.
I'm totally lost. I've had to have anyway, all sorts of occupational therapy due to an accident some time back, as some of the viewers know. But it's kind of akin to some of the occupational therapy things that they throw at you. Like Susie had 3 ducks and 2 chickens, and the chicken eggs are $1.69 a dozen, and duck eggs are $2.99 a dozen. The ducks only lay 1 egg a day, but the chickens lay 2. She needs $37 to get from here to Atlanta on the bus. How many days does it? And it's like, I'm totally lost by then. That's not storytelling. That is absolute confusion.
Oh, yeah. One of the things that I remember was that you and a team of people you were with were going to go into the boardroom of a major retailer.
Major retailer.
They got a big orange front, big orange building, you might say.
Big orange
And
vests.
yeah, and their initials are HD. And you told a story that really just kind of like broke the ice there, And you remember the story you shared there?
Well, we made this presentation, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a presentation for a pretty well thought out program for
Mm-hmm.
this company. And I remember well the guy, the head of the table. I won't say he was the chairman, because honestly, Jim, I don't know at this point if he was or wasn't. I really don't remember. But he was the guy at the head of the table. And after we made our presentation, he looked around the table and he said, "Son," he said, "that's a pretty darn good presentation that you made." He said, "But what you got to understand is we're the 800-pound gorilla that everybody wants to be in bed with." And that was all I could do, not to bust out laughing. And everybody around the table is nodding their head like this. And I'm just like about to lose it, Jim.
Man. I mean, how he came up with that, son, you got to remember, we're the 800-pound gorilla and everybody wants to get in bed with. And I'm like, what planet did you?
When you're making connections like that in stories,
Mm-hmm.
it's important that you recognize people may or may not follow. I'm going to ask the viewers, how many of you have ever told a joke that you just you're about to lose it laughing, telling the joke, and you're standing around with a group of friends, maybe at a meet and greet or something, and they're just kind of looking at each other and they're not getting the joke.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
That's important to remember, because when we tell a story, it's important for us to remember what are the important points that we need to make sure they get.
Yeah.
And how do those important points lead to whatever it is that the conclusion of that story is supposed to bring. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about some of that next week.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be fun. You can see already, folks. That's going to be a fun show. We're going to be talking about.
In fact, Jim, in the program that I taught down in Florida, that mm-hmm. you went through a few years back, one of the things that I used to do in it, I don't know that I did it in your class or not, but I would have somebody tell about their business or tell about themselves, because it was for small businesses, and I would let them ramble on and on and on and on and on, and then I would kind of cut to the chase, take their story and say, why don't we try it this way? Boom, 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 and hit the high points. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I did it by the time that you actually went through that training.
No, I don't recall that, huh?
Some people took it kind of personally but the point of it was, a story is something you're telling for the benefit of somebody else.
Right.
So what we have to do is think in terms of that other person's understanding. Mm-hmm. They don't know all the different players and the places and the this and the that and the other. They're trying to follow to an end that they're not even sure of what the end is.
Oh,
so
yeah.
We have to be aware of that.
I remember having a young lady on when we had the original series back during the 2020, when we were in two rooms. We were in the room in our house and we were in the Zoom room. And we were on Zoom and Facebook Live doing the initial or the original series that we did here that migrated to the TV show. But there was a lady in there talking about her life and the day it changed. And she's a typical mother. She gets up, she's rushed, the kids are dragging around. They haven't done this, they haven't done that. They need this, they need that. And she's trying to get them out the door so she can get herself finished getting ready and get out the door. So she gets out the door, she's driving down the road and she's thinking, I'm going to relax. I'm going to take a deep breath and relax. And she comes up to an intersection. she's got the green light, so she starts to go across, and a dump truck that she didn't see coming ran the red light and crashed into her driver's door. And she says, all of a sudden, I see this big grill that says Mac, you know, and she says, the thing is pushing me sideways. And the driver is not slowing down. So evidently he doesn't see me. And she's going through the way, you know, the things are flying around the car and she's afraid the car is going to turn. She had us in that car with her. We were feeling everything that she was describing. That was an excellent story. Mm-hmm. Because storytelling really is get people to relate to the story and get them and like they're involved in that story. You know, that's really amazing because you don't be telling somebody some goofy story that has no value. You know, you're just going to bore them to death. And
well, and there was another person, a woman who went through another one of the trainings down in Florida, not the training that I taught, but one of the other ones, who had just an amazing story, and she used all of the senses, and she talked about losing her husband and how she remembered the smell in the operating room or in the waiting room, and she could taste the bitterness and she was and the sounds that she was hearing of the monitoring instrument, and it was spellbinding because she tapped into all of the senses of the people and told that story. And so, you know, there's so many aspects to it that we'll cover a few of them next week.
Oh yeah,
at least that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
There you go. There you go. We're gonna need to get started here. We're excited about next week. We hope you are too. And today is July the 7th. It's the National Day for. First here on the list, I see National Strawberry Sundae Day. My goodness gracious.
Oh, I'm done. Let's just end this thing right now.
There you go. That's a sign of intelligence there. And when you mentioned like National Strawberry Sundae, you could talk about how delicious the strawberries look, the whipped cream, and you know the way they're going to take. Oh, you could take somebody on a hike there.
Well, one of the things to keep in mind, Jim, is that there's several reasons why you have these days that are designated different days. And one is because you have organizations that have pushed and pulled and done everything they could to establish them. Hallmark cards and Mother's Day is a great example. The strawberry industry, I'm sure, had something to do with this being designated the day. And in other cases, it may be something more official than that. But obviously, if you have anything at all to do with food or with lifestyle or anything else, you can pull from these lists and then tie your message in that day to it and make it pertinent to what it is that's going on right at that moment and how this ties it in, just like what you're doing right now.
Oh, yeah.
This ties it in. And so what we have to do is to look for those connections that we can make with it.
Oh, that's an excellent point. It really is. Also, today is the National Forgiveness Day. How important is that, Emerson, for us to have the courage to forgive someone? Sometimes it takes courage to do that. It takes strength. You know,
it's one of the most powerful things you can do.
Yes.
The most empowering things you can do is to be the person who says, I forgive you. And the person who's willing to say, please forgive me. Well, what if I didn't do anything wrong? Why should I have to be the one? You know what? It's not about any of that. It's about not letting that wedge, that division, that anger, that resentment, that negativity, and all of those things be a stake in your life.
Oh, yeah.
So that every time you see the person and think about the person, it's still there. And you haven't let go of it. You're living with it.
Yeah.
It's Jim, I put it this way. It's the person who cuts you off in traffic and threw the finger at you and all this other stuff in the morning, and you come into work just hot as you can be. And the thing is, that person doesn't even remember you exist, but you're still giving them space in your head.
Oh, yeah.
And in your gut, in your chest. And the thing is, who's in charge? Who's taking control there? You have given up your control.
You have surrendered yourself.
You've surrendered it. You've surrendered. You've allowed someone else to take your power.
Mm-hmm. You're exactly right.
All that plays right into what we're going to be talking about today. But
yeah,
let's talk more about what today is.
Okay, on global forgiveness, I want to highlight this. In 1962, the symbol of forgiveness, the town of Brookings, Oregon, forgave a Japanese fighter who was a pilot who bombed them in World War II. He offers them a 400-year-old sword as a symbol of his goodwill, which is still in display in the town as a sign of their friendship. Now, a lot of us remember when Pope John Paul had an attempt on his life assassination. And he was a very beloved person, but on May the 17th, 1981, after this attempt, he publicly forgave this man. Says, I'm going to forgive him. And research also shows in 1988, research by the Gallup organization finds that 94% of the people feel like forgiveness is important, but 85% require outside help to achieve this.
And it's a decision.
Yes, it really, truly is.
And Jim is a veteran of Vietnam as well. But as a veteran, veterans have gone a lot further in many cases with people who were their sworn enemies. And I'm thinking specifically of World War II veterans and Japanese veterans coming together, and of Vietnam veterans, and Vietnamese veterans, or Viet Cong veterans coming together.
Yes.
And trips and junkets that have been formed in order to bring them together, because at some point along the way, we recognize forgiveness doesn't necessarily justify anything. Forgiveness is a decision we make, and it is a cleansing decision for ourselves.
Yes.
And it's something that heals ourselves. And when we recognize how that empowers and heals, it's one of the most powerful things that we can do.
It really is. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because when I was in Vietnam in 69 and 70, you either had friendlies or enemies. And that was it. But you look at Vietnam today, Vietnam wants to be more like America than the old communist regime that it was and still under some amount of rule there. But my point being, soldier to soldier, individual to individual. Do I have any hard feelings against any former Viet Cong or NVA soldier? No, I do not. Because their actions towards us was not an action. They didn't hate me personally. And it was everything we did over there was an act of survival and that sort of thing. But you let it go and you say, I'm not going to let this destroy my health, my happiness, my everything. And I would love to sit down and have dinner with, a former Viet Cong or NVA soldier and just say, hey, brother, it's
war itself is dehumanizing. You can't get a normal thinking person to just start shooting indiscriminately at people who have done nothing to him or her personally. You have to dehumanize that person. You have to make it the other, that enemy.
That's a good point.
And that's always been the case.
Yeah.
And it's so wonderful and amazing to see veterans that have found that in their own healing that they're able to reach across.
Yeah,
and,
because
we've seen it with Americans and French and Germans from World War II. We've seen it with Japanese and Americans from the Second World War, and with Vietnam. We've seen it with North Vietnamese and Americans. And it's something that it heals. It heals.
There's a healing there you cannot explain. It's just like it's just like a double shot of healing or something. I can't explain it, but it's really a wonderful thing because, folks, we got to remember one thing. Soldiers that serve in the military do not start wars. That
That's
takes
right.
governments. People don't start wars. People, and that requires governments. And that's why all governments need to be they need to be controlled by the citizens. They really do. Because one thing I remember from my days in Vietnam, I turned 21 there in 1969. And the thing that kind of impressed my young mind was that these people were poor, but you know what? They were just like my mom and dad or anybody else on planet Earth. The farmers that I saw, working the rice paddies and all they wanted to do was live their life, be left alone, have the freedom to love and be with their family and their friends and enjoy their life. Period. That's all that they really wanted out of life. That's just a common thing with everybody. It doesn't matter what country you're in or how much money you've got. Your really thing is you want to be free. You want to be left alone. You want to have the prerogative to love your family and friends and enjoy them, enjoy life, and appreciate them. And that leads, we're heading right into how to free yourself from worry and stress and all that. And that is set yourself free. I mean, just, I know it says it's easy to say stop worrying, but so many times it seems like we enjoy worrying or we embrace it to some degree.
Well, and I'm going to step into this
Okay.
from a different perspective, Jim.
All right.
And it's something that maybe some of the viewers will take exception to.
Okay.
But our perception of freedom isn't necessarily the same perception of freedom that everyone in the world assumes is freedom. And this isn't about right, who's wrong. This is about their life, what they know, their culture, their society, everything about it. We may look at it and see it as oppressive.
Right.
They may look at us and see ours as excessive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a perspective thing. And if there's anything that we learned from our forays, like in Vietnam and in Korea and others that we've done over the years, is that everybody doesn't think the way we do.
Oh, amen to that.
And this isn't about whether was it right, was it wrong, should we have, should we not have. This is about everybody doesn't think the way we do.
Yeah.
And the things that we think you've got to have to be happy, which this leads right into today. The things we think you've got to have be happy, they may not have anything at all to do with whether you're happy or not.
You're exactly right. Because
a lot of the world does. There's a lot of the world that there's parts of our world that they don't want.
Amen.
But are they unhappy? And happy means something different. It's a very personal thing. And happiness is something. You have families, you have caring, you have elders, you have children, you have all of the different things in their society. That's what they know. That's where they're comfortable. That's their world.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that perspective up, because I remember in Vietnam, I don't remember a specific thing, but I do know that once in a while, somebody in the military may give a farmer a thing, thinking the way we think that's going to make their job easier. They look at it and go like, oh, I could use this piece for that. I could use this piece for this. And they use it to their, advantage and what they see, because that just gives you a simple, clear picture of the difference of my insight, your insight, and because we all have different opinions. That's why if we're standing on a corner and five of us see an accident, we'll have five different accounts of what we saw.
That's right.
And that's just human nature. So I'm glad you brought that up. I really am.
I'm gonna step way out in it here for just a second because
Okay.
this really was a seminal book for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's when I say the name of the book, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to get irritated right away because they haven't read it, but they know the phrase. Okay. And the phrase has gotten messed up and corrupted over the years. The name of the book was from the late 50s called The Ugly American. Now, over the years, The Ugly American has been a disparaging thing that's been used talking about Americans. But in reality, the book, and I'm real quick to say this, The Ugly American in it was the hero, was the person who got all this. It's just, he had a real ruddy, bad complexion and everything else and was not considered an attractive, physically attractive person. That's where the title actually came from. But when you read that book, if you can find a copy of it, it did something that I never saw a book do up until that point. They were set in a mythical Southeast Asian country. Okay. And all of these different players, all of these industrialists and all of these politicians and all of these, you name it, were different players in this from both sides. But when one would speak, you'd read what they said, but you would hear what the other person was hearing. And there was always this disconnect. What you're talking about, like giving them this wonderful tool or instrument, and they go and use it for something totally different. It's that disconnect. And it was the first time in my young life, because I was probably in high school, maybe at the time, in my young life, when I realized the rest of the world doesn't all think and process and understand and hear things the way I do. They have a different set of values and things that they're looking at it through. And it took, and I can't say that at that young age that I processed it that deeply, but I got it that everybody in the world isn't exactly the same. So being judgmental about this person or that person or this country or that country and the things that matter to them versus the things that may matter to us, you know what? Sometimes we jump to conclusions that just aren't the actual conclusions. I'm going to give you one quick example here. Okay. In many Middle Eastern countries, women are expected to wear a burqa, or a covering over their face. Well, in America, that's like, you have the right to be, and that's where our head immediately goes because of our culture.
Right.
However, some of the staunchest offenders of it, you'll find in many cases, will be women in that culture. Because in their culture, that's something for them that liberates them. It doesn't take away from them. And they see it from a whole different perspective. And I tell you what, Jim, and of course, you know me as a marketer. The most challenging thing in marketing and in life is to see it through the other person's eyes.
Oh, yeah.
And not just through your eyes. And what you're talking about when you were in Southeast Asia, I can bring you this wonderful, phenomenal suggestion, a tool or whatever. And in the Ugly American, one of the things was they wanted to build roads through here, and they wanted to bring in all this agricultural advancements and things. And the Ugly American basically said, he brought in some chickens so the people would have chickens so they could have eggs. You know, it wasn't a big deal. And he was the one who ended up getting sent home, you know, but he was the one who got it. Yeah. And for us, the challenge is, can we get it? Can we see it through their eyes? And this really, I know you want to get over it. We've been talking a half hour here. And part of our discussion today is about being happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes that matters most when we're looking at ourselves. Because happiness and unhappiness is a state of mind.
Yes.
And we have the ability to change that and look at it and come at it from a different place. God gave us this ability. Not everybody uses it. God gave us this ability. We can dwell, and we spent quite a few shows talking about successful positive mental attitude, for example. We can choose to dwell on all of that stuff, everything that's bad, everything that's happening, all the stuff in the world, all of the horrible things on the news, and all this stuff. We don't have to put our head in the sand to look and see a different perspective and things that are good and hopeful and beneficial and opportunities and things that we have that we can work towards that are uplifting instead of tearing down.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I love what you're sharing there. And it's just right on with what we're talking about. We're talking about living your life, freedom from worry. And it is so important for us to, embrace that, because if we hang on to or we harbor the feelings that we felt at that time when we were wronged or harmed or insulted or whatever, and we embrace those and harbor those inside,
it's a cancer.
Yeah, the only person that's hurting is you, because it tarnishes. It's actually like a shield that keeps the blessings of the energy of the universe, which comes from, as I say, the Señor in the sky. It can't go through those shields, and you enslave yourself, and you're going to be miserable, because when you forgive others, or just say, I'm just going to forgive, and I'm going to let that go. I'm not let it bother me. You've freed yourself from your own personal mental prison. And
well, it's the person who's been hurt, or who's had more than one relationship where they've been hurt or wronged or whatever, and they go into this, I'll never be hurt again. I'll never let this happen to me.
I'll never trust again.
And they lock themselves away, and so in the process, they shut out all of the benefits and blessings of the world that are there, all of the other people that could bring joy and light and laughter and wonderful things into your life. And at the same time, I'm a big believer in your unique gifts, your uniqueness. They're shutting off all of that from everybody around them. So they're not sharing any of that joy and that beauty and those gifts, and they're locking it away. And what happened? It's a cancer. It's a cancer, and it ends up dominating your life. It doesn't liberate you at all, and you end up going through your life not being touched and not touching others in the ways that we're meant to.
Yeah, you're exactly right, because we are social creatures, and the one thing that we crave and we need, we can't live without, it's just like oxygen and water, and that is love. We really cannot, you may exist and you may have heartbeat in your veins and breath in your lungs, but you are not alive on the inside if you don't have any love for yourself and for others. And Emerson,
love for yourself is where it starts too.
Yes, exactly. You got to love yourself first, because you cannot give something to someone that you do not own. Exactly. And I believe you were going to read or share a prayer with us, weren't you? Yeah. You've heard this, but this is perfect. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is in happiness. Happiness really is a state of mind. If you say, I just don't feel happy, it's a state of mind. And as a state of mind, it becomes a decision. And you say, well, I can't, if I'm sad and everything else, I can't just decide it away. It's not about ignoring anything that's going on in your life. It's about deciding to find happiness in spite of everything. And so this great comment we've all heard, the Serenity Prayer, it's known as, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. That's first. Because there are many things in our life, Jim, that we have no control over.
Oh, I know.
The courage to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. If you cannot, you're not going to change anybody else in your life. You're not going to change your boss, your spouse, your kids. You're not going to change anybody. We only have that power in our own life.
That's right.
So having the wisdom to know the difference is important. Having the courage when there are things that you can change, to step out, stand up, and do that. And that may be a lifetime.
Yeah.
But the courage to make those things different that you can change, that's important. But the wisdom to know the difference, the wisdom to know the difference, that's where you'll find the happiness, because happiness is a state of mind. It is something
it
you
really
can find that place where you can be a happy person. And that doesn't mean that everything is just honky-dory and going the way that you want it to go in your life, and you don't have a care in the world. That doesn't mean any of those silly things.
I got to tell a story about myself, and I was part of the problem, I'll admit it. This is back in January and February of 1969. It was the very first Reforger 1, the Army called it, the military did. Reforger is an acronym. It's REFORGER, Reforger 1. You can look it up on Wikipedia. I was stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas. We were the only unit from the United States to go over to Germany. And Reforger, the acronym stood for Return of Forces to Germany. Well, you can imagine being over there in Grafenwehr, Germany. They had us in tents. There was snow on the ground. We were cold. We were miserable. And we were out there for weeks. And I mean, there was no warming up. There was no, there were no comforts there at all. We were, I was one of the guys complaining too. I'll be honest about it. And finally, this old sergeant, he had enough of us. He got us together and says, boys, and he didn't light into us or, call us a bunch of everything but a good milk cow or anything like that. But he says, I've had it with you bunch. I've just had it with you. I mean, just shut up. One thing I've learned in my life is that when you're in a miserable situation, don't make yourself more miserable than is absolutely necessary. And I never have forgotten those words. And then he told us, he says, one of the reasons why you're so cold at night, you're sleeping on cots. There's cold air under you. There's cold air over you. He says, get off those cots, dig a little hole, a little tunnel like, put some straw in there and put your sleeping bag in there and roll up and get all covered up in that, because therefore the ground will help insulate you with the straw. And of course, we had to go out and get pine needles and all that. He says, I didn't say it would be easy, but that's what you do. You don't let that cold air drift underneath you, because the wind would blow and those tents would flap and all that. And it was 100% miserable, but I never forgot his words. Don't ever make yourself more miserable than is absolutely necessary. Yeah, it was. It was just, we was kind of like, what do we think of that? It's one of those aha moments when the bell rings in your mind, you go and the light bulbs go off and you're like, he's right, because he was right. And when you think about that prayer, that serenity prayer, that is just worth repeating again. And I'm going to ask Emerson if he'd be so kind to repeat it again and listen to the words, if you don't mind, ladies and gentlemen. Please listen.
God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
That is powerful.
To know the difference.
From the Alpha to the Omega, that covers everything, because the courage to change the things that you can. And I believe that the focal point should be on what's in it for you, but what's in it for others. If that is your focal point, because that will be the most rewarding thing you can do. Think about yourself. If you go to a store and you buy yourself, a new shirt or something like that, or new clothes or shoes or whatever that's on sale, yeah, you feel good about it. But when you give the same type of a gift, say a pair of shoes or a bag of groceries or something, to someone that doesn't have much money, or they got a need in their life, maybe they can't get around or whatever, and you give them that bag of groceries, the feeling of joy and jubilee will far surpass anything that you bought for yourself. It really
Yeah,
will.
I many years ago, um, I was in the car business, and I agree 100% with you.
Hmm.
And where I was at, there was I was one of the managers. I don't remember. I did a bunch of different things in it. So I was a new car, used car manager, and next door to us was a mattress manufacturer.
Hmm.
So when people would get a new mattress made, they would end up having these mattresses they had to haul away. And so I hooked up with a group called Lutheran Social Services, which was real big at the time on relocating people from Eastern Europe, which was still behind the Iron Curtain at that time.
Right, right.
And so they would call me up if they had a family. And one of the things that I was able to do was get a truck off the lot. I'd go and pick up one of these turned in mattresses where somebody
Hmm.
had bought one. This was their old mattress.
Hmm.
And take it and deliver it. I'd deliver it to the warehouse, or I'd deliver it to the apartment that
Hmm.
the people were being set up in. And inevitably, the people would want to do something for me or for
Yeah.
my family. And I learned at that time one of the things not to do was to say, "Oh no, you don't need to do anything."
Hmm.
They didn't have anything.
Right.
They wanted to be able to do something, and that little dignity element, that little humanity element, that wanted to they wanted to be able to give back to me and to my family. And it was a hard thing to begin to accept that.
Hmm.
Um, so they weren't just a charity anymore, Now
Right, right.
there was one person helping another person, and they wanted to help. They wanted to do something for us. So I had a number of different great experiences during that time, but I'll never forget this one in particular. They offered, they wanted me and my family to come over, and they were going to make borscht, which is made from beets.
Hmm.
Now here, this isn't how you make borscht. Anybody who knows how to make borscht, they had mayonnaise, and they had some pickled beets, and they mixed the pickled beets into the mayonnaise, and they served it to us as borscht because that was what they had.
Hmm.
And I'd love to tell you how wonderful it tasted, but it didn't. It was, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but the fact that they wanted to do that, and that was the best that they had, and they were wanting to give the best that they had,
Hmm.
meant we enjoyed every single bite.
Amen.
And
Amen.
there's the giving part of it is something that is often not thought about. We can have a big heart and want to give to charity and all these other things, but recognizing that people have an inherent need in their own value to be able
Hmm.
to reciprocate, to be able to give
Right,
back, to be able to show their appreciation. And it's not that we give to get.
right.
We're not doing it to get,
Hmm.
but we need to be willing to let people also show their appreciation back.
Yes, give them the dignity to do that.
It's a dignity thing. It's
Yeah.
something that it changes the human condition. It's
Hmm.
something that goes beyond just charity and raises it to a level of interpersonal communication and relationship and
Sure.
humanity.
That's one thing wrong with our welfare system here in the United States because
Oh yeah.
people have been conditioned for decades, families, generations, for decades
Hmm.
to sit back and wait for the government to send them some money, and
Hmm.
that is their lifestyle. And deep down inside, these people are not happy. They feel like they're still missing out on something. It's because they've never, most of them, have not experienced the joy in giving back. And that's what Emerson's talking about, being able to give back the best that you can, whatever you can, because that, that just gives you an opportunity for your dignity to grow. They get robbed of their dignity.
Hmm.
That keeps them enslaved to Uncle Sam's plantation, you might say. And you'll never be happy there. It's impossible.
And when politicians try to fix it,
Oh,
what they try to do is to create some kind of minimum, like, oh, you got to do this many hours of this or this many. It's like you take a single mom who's working two jobs,
right.
and you give her some assistance. You don't
Hmm.
need to say, well, you got to work 15 hours a week.
Hmm.
She's already giving back,
Yes.
trying to be the mother and raising the kids and being responsible for it.
Amen.
It's the humanity level of it is recognizing the way that somebody is giving you are able to give back
Hmm.
uh, from what they've got. And
Yes.
I'm not gonna get over into political structures or things like this. And I disagree wholeheartedly with Marxism and socialism and stuff like that. But
Yes.
something that Marx did say that is so true is from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. It's not making some blanket policy,
Right.
saying everybody is able to give something.
Hmm.
And the dignity that comes into that
Hmm.
is that we respect, it doesn't matter how big that is, we respect that dignity and receive it.
And the thought behind it.
Yeah, that's it.
Mhm.
Don't be emailing Jim talking about me promote Marxism here, because I'm not. I'm talking about the
Well, we know
concept.
that.
Yeah, I'm talking about the concept though, that we respect what somebody else is able to give as a contributor in to us or to society,
Hmm.
and do it and recognize that's a value by itself. And there's
Hmm.
joy. We're giving them. We're talking today. The subject's supposed to be about happiness, but there's a joy in that.
Hmm.
There's a happiness. There's the ability on both of our parts to receive it, and their ability to give it. There brings joy. I had
Hmm.
a in my first family was Hispanic. You and I have talked about this before, Jim.
Hmm.
And I remember one of our trips to South Texas. We were staying out on some resort out on an island or something. One of my sister-in-laws. When are you gonna come? Because it was my birthday month. When are you gonna come? We want you to come. When are you coming over? We want you to come over and visit with us. So we were arranging, because when you go out to visit family, it's got time here and time here and time here, right? So finally, the day came. We came over, and my sister. I still get choked up on this, Jim. My sister and her husband, they literally call about killing the fatted calf. They had they made their livelihood off of the few little goats and chickens and things that they had.
Hmm.
Okay, they had they had taken one of their kid goats, and they were barbecuing. They knew that I loved barbacoa, and
Mm.
they were barbecuing. They were barbecuing that for me, for their brother, for me. Now this would have paid for probably 2 or 3 weeks of their expenses, their living expenses. This was a deep gift for them. This wasn't just,
Mm.
hey, let's have a cookout.
Yeah.
And it touched me. It still does. touch me deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Absolutely.
it's giving from the heart. And it's something that it cost them to do that.
Sure it did.
And they did it on their own. And when we give people that opportunity, the dignity that that brings, and the ability for that person to reciprocity is a powerful thing. Being able to have reciprocity and feel like I'm doing something that has value for you. You've done something that has value for me. I'm doing something that has value for you. That's a real key in happiness. To feel like you have value.
We got just about 6 minutes left, and I want Emerson to share this story again about the micro loans to these very poor people. And this is a classic example of how you give a hand up instead of a handout. Listen to this, please.
I was working with a company, and they had begun a nonprofit that we actually grew an international membership to over 1 million people. And the purpose of this was to teach entrepreneurial lessons. So we had gathered hundreds and hundreds of trainings and courses, and people had donated them. And the people took part in this, and they paid a small amount of money. You say, why didn't you give it to them for free? Well, because of what we just explained. If we charged a small amount of money, now they were doing something, and they had a part in it. They had skin in it. Okay. So one of the things that we did was we supported other international nonprofits like Kiva International, where you can buy a flock of ducks, for somebody, and others. So there was a doctor from Bangladesh, Dr. Yunus, and he won the Nobel Prize for this concept. And we supported this program quite a bit. But it was the concept of micro lending. And Dr. Yusuf figured, if I take $50 or $100 and I give it to a man, if I give it to a man in a village, he's going to go and he's going to spend it on liquor and on gambling and on drugs or prostitutes or whatever. Okay. Don't write Jim about me saying that, because this was the concept, though. If he gave it to the women, the women would take that $50 or $100 and they'd buy some thread and they'd buy some needles and they'd buy buttons, or they'd buy a cell phone, and or they would do different things, and they would make a little cottage business where they were able to make a little bit of money for their family and eventually bring in other women in their community. And they would change the lives of more than one family. And then they would change the community, you change the country, you change the world. That was Dr. Yusuf. That was his concept, and he won the Nobel Prize for it. Now, here's the bottom line. Why not just give the money to the people? I mean, there are lots and lots of non-government organizations out there that deliver, boatloads of grain and this and that and the other. Well, by loaning it to them, you gave them the chance to have dignity. And the repayment rate on those little micro loans, and there's billions of dollars in micro loans now. There are multiple organizations that have done this now over the years. The repayment rate on the micro loans to these little women who are living in villages in developing countries, the repayment rate is higher than the top line credit rate in the United States for banks giving loans. The default rate among us who have the money to make the payments back is higher. But these women, nothing will keep them from making that payment back, because you have invested in them. And
you trusted them, and they
trusted them.
And they want to. I'm getting excited. Excuse me. I keep cutting you off. I apologize. Okay. But I get excited because you invested in them, and they want to have the opportunity and they want to show you they've got the dignity that they're going to pay back those loans.
And they do.
Oh, yeah.
They do.
That's
It's
why.
amazing.
Yeah. That's why one of the things in freeing up yourself from worry and things of this nature, my goodness gracious, you open the door to be blessed. You open the door for, for you to have integrity, to be able to make the world a better place, one person at a time. Because like Emerson says, bring in boatloads of grain and all this stuff. We want to do things too many times on a grandioso scale. But that's a pipe dream. It really
and sometimes that's necessary when you have natural disasters and things like that
yeah,
to mobilize.
yeah.
But that's different.
That's a different breed of cat.
Yeah. But I have, I learned too. I mean, the very first time that I ever hired a woman, she was in Pakistan, and I hired her to do a project through one of the online services, and I posted what it was. It was going online, pulling information from a membership site, and I needed to have addresses and names and phone numbers. It was a complex thing, and she came back and gave me a bid on this project, and it was some odd and about like $82.67. And we're talking probably 10 or 12,000 fields that needed to be entered in a spreadsheet. For those of you who know, it's a spreadsheet or type of program. And everything in my being wanted to say, "Oh, that's not enough for this. This is a big project. I'll just pay a couple of $100, whatever." But I resisted that. I let her set the rate, and she did the work amazingly, flawlessly. And I made sure she got paid instantly, because I realized here's somebody in a country, she may not be able to leave her own front door without a son or an uncle or a brother walking out that door with her. She can't go and just get a job and work in an office and make money for her family, but she's found a way, and she's getting to set her own value, her own amount, and not being questioned about it, not being challenged on it. And that's powerful, folks. Happiness isn't just about everything's perfect, but dignity is a big part of it. And recognizing that in the midst of everything that we have happening in our life, there really are people who have it worse. And there are people who are finding happiness in the midst of it. In fact, one last thing, Jim, because
we're short on time.
This is scriptural, but in the Old Testament, I think it's in Isaiah, God says, "I'll give you oil of joy in the midst of the ashes of mourning." And that's exactly what we're talking about here.
There you go.
Circumstances don't determine it. You determine it.
And those principles are true, just like the principle of the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and no one can change that. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. And we sincerely hope we shared some great information with you today that will help you in your hour of need. Most importantly, be sure and like us and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, just the Messages of Inspirational Stories TV show on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you again. If you have
share with your friends.
There you go. What Emerson said. Bye-bye.